There's a definite sense that everyone's run from that side of the chamber to the other side of the chamber, but perhaps there. Very well. Very well. We resume debate on P21, and the next to speak is Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. I'm not going to say a great deal because I think a lot of what I wanted to say has already been said. So I'm very sympathetic to the underlying motivation of Deputy Cole's proposition, because across the whole of the wellbeing sector, both mental and physical health, we know that there are very many people who are vulnerable. And equally, we know, I'm sure, you don't need to dig very deep into the internet to know that there are people out there peddling what is little more than snake oil, and that people are sucked into treatments that will not do them any good whatsoever. But I do think that the Minister's suggestion that knowledge, that information and guidance be given is better than the issues we've talked about with regulation. So I've had a lifetime interest in wellbeing and health, and I have qualifications in 3 different complementary therapies, including counselling, only at level 2. So I wouldn't deem of holding myself out as a counsellor of any description. But I am qualified in other therapies, and thought for a short time that I might have practised in one. I only thought about it for a short time because I realised that practice was barely going to pay for my holidays, let alone my mortgage. So I came back to law. But what became clear to me through that experience is that if you are going to practice in any professional field, you do have a duty of care, and the people training you will tell you that you have a duty of care and a responsibility to your clients or patients. And that not only should you have qualifications, but you should also be holding insurance. And there are people out there who provide, I don't think we've heard insurance talked about yet, but there are people who provide insurance to the wide range of complementary therapists across all disciplines. And it would seem to me that there are 2 key things that the public should understand, or 2 key questions that anyone seeking counselling or any other form of complementary health therapy should be asking of someone they are consulting. And those 2 questions are, what are your qualifications? Do you have a recognised qualification? And secondly, are you insured? And if that person is not carrying insurance, then I would suggest you don't go anywhere near them. So I was also given by my own GP some years ago, I said to him, somewhat embarrassed, that I had seen a complementary therapist, and he said, well, that's absolutely fine. There are lots of therapies out there that will help you, that may help you. Some will be more valuable than others, but his advice, and he said, this is what I tell all my patients, is set a financial limit or a number of sessions. And when the money's run out, or your allotted number of sessions have run out, if that person has not cured you, they are unlikely to cure you, go and do something else, because that is what GPs do. If they haven't cured somebody, if they haven't found an answer to a problem after 2 or 3 visits, they will refer them on to another specialist. So that is my contribution to debate. I do think education and guidance is probably better at this stage to cover the whole variety of complementary therapists that are out there, both, I know we're particularly talking about therapeutic counselling, which is as potentially damaging to people as to some of the peddlers of physical therapies, that some of which can be harmful in the wrong hands. So thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. I haven't made up my mind how I'm going to vote on this one, and I like debates like that. I think that the Deputy should be applauded for bringing something to the Assembly that we can really have a good think about and have a proper debate on. It's a really interesting proposition, and I thank him for bringing it. Like the previous speaker, my interest in this is partly personal. I have got some training in counselling skills myself. I studied psychology at university, and I think that the services in this area are extremely important to the health of islanders. And of course, amongst the Assembly, my role is chairing the health scrutiny panel. So I have a particular interest in it from that angle as well. I do think, so the question comes down to whether harm is being done, and do we need to take this measure that the Deputy is proposing to fix it? And upon considering whether harm is being done, I concluded that there probably is some harm being done, and other members have spoken about this. And an area that I wanted to focus in on, which hasn't been referenced, is conversion therapy. So my other interest in this is, of course, as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, and so-called conversion therapy is the attempt to suppress, divert, or change somebody's sexual orientation or gender identity. And these so-called therapies are often targeted at lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people under the false pretense that these identities are disordered and need to be cured somehow. And these therapies, first of all, they don't work. Secondly, they are coercive and abusive, and they cause enduring psychological and physical harm to LGBTQ plus people. And yet, so they remain legal almost everywhere in the world. Now, the next question we might ask is this happening in Jersey? And I have to say, I am not certain on the answer to that question. The only inkling that I do have about this is based on some research that was presented to States members. It was either in the previous term or the term before that, by a student who had carried out some research locally, whereby she approached a number of counsellors and therapists and requested access to conversion therapy. And the findings of this research was that several of these counsellors and therapists said that that was a service they could provide. I'm uncertain whether it is happening in Jersey. I'd say based off research in other jurisdictions, it probably has happened. And this, for me, and the risk that it could happen, and that there is no mechanism in our legislation or policies, there would be no mechanism by which to stop it or prevent it. This, for me, is a reason to regulate. And incidentally, I hope the Dean doesn't mind me mentioning him. I was really heartened to have a conversation with the Dean about this, and to find, actually I had the feeling of him kind of standing shoulder to shoulder with the LGBTQ plus community, and he said that it's something that faith leaders in the island absolutely condemn. And I'm grateful for that. And I think, if anything, what I want to do with my speech today around whether we should regulate counsellors or not is to say, regulation or not, this is something that should not be provided by counsellors, and it is not welcome in our island. And indeed, it's something globally. I do think we should probably look at some legislation to ban it. I've recently been accepted as a member of the Global Equality Caucus, an organisation that I encourage members to join, as the only body of international network of parliamentarians that is dedicated to tackling discrimination against LGBTQ plus people. And this is one of their main campaigns. It's of huge concern. So the harm that is potentially being caused, either by this type of therapy, so-called therapy, or by incompetence or well-meaning substandard therapies, I think there's probably harm being caused. But is this the right way to resolve it? I think it was Deputy Luce mentioned that even if we did regulate counsellors, then other titles could be used. And again, I'm aware of this in other jurisdictions. There are people using titles such as peer support worker, which is a legitimate function, or coaching. So I'm not certain that this is and I think a lot of this is going to rest on the deputy's summing up. I would really like him to directly address the points that I've made, and is he certain that regulation is the only way to prevent harm being caused in this way? I think, again, personal freedom is an issue. And this is kind of arguing the other way. And this is why I mentioned I haven't decided which way I'm voting yet, because I'm a strong believer in individual autonomy and personal freedom. And whilst I firmly believe that health services should be regulated, those that are interacting physically with somebody's body, I think that should be regulated. Others have mentioned that. But where counselling is being provided, and I think other members have mentioned this, possibly Deputy Wilson, this is more of a social contract. And I think we're straying into quite dangerous territory if we start regulating conversations between two individuals. So I wonder if the Deputy could remark on what he thinks about that in his summing up. I noted in the government comments that the proposed solution was to educate people and to run a campaign informing people about this. Absolutely necessary, and I think that needs to be done whether we are regulating or not, because there are so many different types of therapy, and I don't think that people understand all of the different types: CBT, interpersonal therapy, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, psychodynamic therapy, which is the kind of Freudian style, which I think most people think counselling is. It's not just that kind of therapy. There's so many different types available. And Deputy Gardner's call for, I think she mentioned there should be a web page where people can just look up how to ascertain what kind of counselling is available. I think that's critical, and I'm actually a bit shocked that isn't available already. And I really encourage anybody, whether they're already accessing services, to ask their provider, what kind of therapy are you providing to me at the moment, if that hasn't been made clear, and to do a bit of research about it and establish whether it is indeed the right thing for you. So I'm going to finish there, sir, but I want to just reiterate my message that certain types of counselling therapies are harmful, including so-called conversion therapy. That's not something that should be offered in Jersey. And if any members of the public are aware of this, please do get in touch with me. And I'll be listening with interest to the following speeches and to the deputies summing up.
Thank you very much, Deputy Barbara Wall.
Oh. Thank you, sir. I didn't think it would be that quick. I understand the reasoning, sir, behind this proposition, which I would support, but in the absence of any UK legislation covering these services, I'd find it difficult to bring about some Jersey legislation. As the Deputy made reference to my input around the regulation of nurses, but that was actually because those professions are in the first instance covered by their professional bodies. For example, the Nurses Midwives Council and the General Medical Council, etc. I could go on, which is absolutely enshrined in UK law. The Health Minister and the team approach, I feel, is set out in the Minister's paper. However, if and when the counselling registering bodies approach the UK government to have their professional services set out in the UK law, then Jersey, I feel, could consider revisiting this aspect. But in the meantime, to have a campaign, I feel, is the correct pathway to help and assist and educate people, especially in times of their vulnerability. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? If no other member wishes to speak.
Sir.
Oh yes, Deputy Tadier.
That's okay. Sorry for the delay, sir. So I just wanted to take maybe a slightly different perspective. I don't have any expertise in this area, so I look at it maybe from the perspective of what would I want in place if I or a loved one had to go and seek help from a therapeutic counsellor. And it could be because there's been a recent bereavement or there's been a difficult patch in one's life. And I must admit that when Deputy Coles first raised this issue with me, I was just surprised, and I've heard the same repeated since. What do you mean that therapeutic counsellors don't currently have to register with a governing body, and what do you mean that they don't have to already register with the Jersey Care Commission? And I think if you spoke to people on the street, they would expect that to already be the case. So I think what Deputy Coles is doing here is highlighting what's clearly an omission in the whole package of therapeutic, in the whole package of healthcare and services that are available, and saying actually this is something where there does need to be some kind of oversight. So I don't think it washes to say, oh, you know, we're going to offer instructions and advice, because I think Deputy Dublé hit the nail on the head, is that when you go to a therapist, there's a relationship of trust there. There's also potentially an asymmetric relationship in terms of the power structures. So whilst I listened with interest to Deputy Miller's speech, she speaks with an element of authority, obviously, on the subject. And I was expecting her to come round to the point and say, and that's why I'll be supporting this proposition. Because one doesn't necessarily have the wherewithal, or even it doesn't enter one's head to think about, when you get a recommendation from somebody saying, here, go and speak to this person, I think they're really good. The first or second thing that you think isn't, do they have insurance and are they registered? I think you may not be in the place in your life where those kind of considerations are on your mind. And I think that's why we regulate as an assembly. And that we seem to be applying the mantra of there's too much red tape, and regulation is a bad thing, to something where I think we should be really cautious about it. So I very much see Deputy Coles as almost the little boy who's pointing out that the emperor has no clothes, and we've allowed ourselves to get into this narrative, if you like, almost, where the minister's saying, oh, let's not do this because it's too difficult and there's another way to do it. Well, actually, I think the central ground should really be, of course, we need to regulate this. How do we regulate it? Not if we regulate it. And I see this very much as an in principle proposition. So Deputy Coles is suggesting two things that need to happen here, which one is that if you're a therapist, and it could be any kind of counsellor, therapist, you first of all should be registered with a governing body. If a governing body doesn't exist for the type of therapy that you're offering to people, then that should be an alarm bell in itself, because what's the chances that somebody over here is so cutting edge that they've developed a new form of therapy that nobody else in the world is doing? I don't think that's going to happen. And secondly, that they should register with the Care Commission. It is a form of care that we are giving to people, that they are giving to people, and therefore it doesn't seem unreasonable that they should at least register with that commission, sir. So I think for those reasons, I think we absolutely should be supporting this, because we want to make sure that those who are going to therapists can have confidence that they're dealing with people who have gone through the basics and have registered with the relevant bodies. If I can say so, I was interested by the comments of Deputy Dublé around conversion therapy, but also actually, whilst I think is that this isn't about regulating conversations that people have with each other. That's clearly not what this is about. This is about actually people who offer services which are charged for and purport to have skills that can be of benefit to people's mental health or emotional health. And it's about saying, if you purport to have those skills and sell those skills to other people, and you could be doing it voluntarily, of course, but if you're offering those services, you should at least pass a small hurdle. The irony isn't lost on me that we've just had a debate previously about having a high bar for those who might want to be candidates for elections, so not even states members, just to be candidates. But when it comes to something tangible here that actually is affecting people's mental health, and remember, I go back to that point, what would I expect, what would members expect, or what would our family and friends expect if they were seeing a counsellor where you could theoretically get bad advice. You could have somebody who is a rogue or who just isn't properly qualified, who is a quack, shall we say. What recourse do they have? I would certainly want to make sure that they had that. On the conversion therapy point, I would suggest that actually it's a much more problematic point when we get into that field, because there's something that underlies conversion therapy, or whether it's the casting out of demons and the laying on of hands, etc. Those are all based on belief systems, and if there is a dogma or a doctrine underlying which says that homosexuality is a sin, that it's evil and it's not natural, and therefore you need to be cured of that underlying problem. It's the actual doctrine which is the problem, and the conversion therapy itself is a symptom of that problem. And of course, somebody who subscribes to that belief system, who might find themselves in that situation seeking the therapy, I'd suggest it's a much more complex problem, and I'm not sure it's going to be resolved one way or the other by this proposition. But I would simply say, of course, that I agree with Deputy Dublé, and I'd urge her to support this proposition.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? If no other member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and I call upon Deputy Coles to respond.
Thank you, sir. And first of all, can I just thank everybody who's participated in this debate. I feel it has been a very respectful, very credible and very thought-provoking debate. I think we have all highlighted some of the issues surrounding the needs for mental health and providing safe and secure locations for people to receive that care from. So I'm just going to first address Deputy Dublé's points while they're fresh in my mind, fresh after lunch. She mentions about this possibly being a regulating of a conversation between two people, but of course, counselling isn't a conversation, sir. It is what many would maybe consider a guided conversation, where one person has the power in that room to try to have the conversation where the person then learns and grows about themselves. So they shouldn't. And also to address a word that Deputy Tadier just used, he used the word about somebody giving advice. Well, counsellors should not be giving advice. So that is one of the most clear and detailed things that people forget. If you go to see a counsellor and they offer you advice, they are not a counsellor. Counsellors are there to guide you through your thoughts, your actions, to make you make the choices and to change your thought processes so you can live yourself in a more constructive way. Deputy Dublé also asked whether this was the only tool, and I'm sure it's not the only tool that we could use to regulate and these kinds of fields. But so it's the most clear and obvious one that I had in front of me, and they could see, because it is something that we already have and we already do. I also want to just discuss about bring back up the timeline and approach of this, because as Deputy Luce, as Minister of Environment, has mentioned, that he is proceeding at good pace with his work on regulating the hospital and ambulances, and he wants to do cannabis dispensaries and prescribers after that. And part of my initial discussion with him is absolutely I agreed. I did not want to interrupt that work. It was never that intention to do so. It was only after conversations with an officer that works for both Deputy Luce and Deputy Binet was I advised by this officer that the work on the legislative programme was taking place. And it was taking place in this field. So it was better, once that book was open and it was being redrafted, to do it at the same time, rather than to come back at another point and do the work again. So I do apologise to the ministers if that maybe has not necessarily been as clear as it could be, but that is why this has come through in this way, because that was the advice that I received. I should want to spend another good thank you to Deputy Miles. She was very much more articulate than I was in my opening speech. I think she delivered the points very, very accurately and very, very credibly. Both Deputy Scott and Deputy Dublé, sorry, session on the room, I forgot for a moment her surname. Deputy Dublé mentioning about different forms of therapy and different forms of things. I think Deputy Dublé mentioned psychodynamic, which he is right, it was the work of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, but that's they are the fathers of modern psychology, sir. We can trace lots of work back to them, even the works of Carl Rogers, who then came up with human-centred, which is mostly what most counsellors focus upon. So I've made my points around this is people need to have that element of trust. And actually, sorry, Deputy Miller mentioned about insurance. There's a key point that the majority of governing bodies, when you sign up to them, give you insurance as part of your fee. So if you signed up and you were obliged to maintain that membership of your governing body, you'll also be insured. So that, I thought, was a very good point actually to bring back up. And when we talk about red tape and cost, actually by having them sign up to a government body, it will cover an extra cost as part of it. It's not adding an additional cost on top. Especially, well, that is definitely, I can confirm that as certain for the BACP at least, and possibly the other two major groups. Deputy Gardner, I'm interested to learn that you were a social worker. I think that's incredible.
Chair, please.
Sorry, sir.
You didn't know that Deputy Gardner was a social worker.
So I was very impressed to find out that Deputy Gardner was a social worker, because that requires to be registered to a governing body as well as registered to the Jersey Care Commission. This is in Jersey, not in
Please, no conversations between members.
As far as I'm aware, sir, they have to register with both the governing body and through the Care Commission, because that's the advice that I was provided by the Care Commission. And so I find it interesting that that level of work, where again you're dealing with vulnerable people, requires this process that I'm suggesting here today, sir. But then we have another group of vulnerable people that apparently this is not easy for or is too difficult to do. So I am glad at the end of the result of this that the Minister will be carrying out this campaign, and I hope he would help come to me and I can help participate in helping formulate questions or points that need to be raised to the public to make sure that we cover off a lot of things. So if members don't support this, I do hope that still will happen, and I hope it's a broader thing. Although I do still have concerns that when we carry out an advertising campaign or an awareness campaign, that these are only a snapshot in that moment. What if somebody has an episode and they can't recall this information and they just reach out and seek, and and that level of trust isn't being reinforced by regulation, and we end up in a situation, unfortunately, where somebody does go to somebody who isn't properly and adequately trained to deal with the situation they're going through. But again, sir, I do urge members to support me on this proposition, because I do think it's the lightest touch form of regulation that we can place on somebody in a position of trust. I think this is the right thing to do, fundamentally, sir. I think we owe the people of Jersey the security in knowing that if we're going to let people trade in services which influence people's minds, that their element of trust should be maintained and supported by government, sir. So I will, once again, thanks members for having a very polite, very well thought through debate, and sir, I will call for the appel.
Very much. The appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been defeated. 18 votes pour, 26 votes contre, no abstentions. Yes, they're all called for.
Those voting for the Conotab of St Martin, Grouville, St Mary and St Saviour, and deputies Southern, Ward, Alves, Mezek, Coles, Porray, Miles, Curtis, Feltham, and Kovac, and online, Deputies Tadier, Jeune, Stevenson and Doublé. Those voting contre, the Connotables of St Helier, St Brelard, Trinity, St John's, St Juan, and Deputies Labby, Luce, Morel, Lehegre, Ayer, Gardner, Farnham, Osoph, War, Scott, Binney, Miller, Howell, Binney, Ferry, Curtis, Ward, Wilson and Andrews, and online, Deputy Moore and the Connotable of St Clement.
Very well, that concludes public business, and we now come to the arrangement of future business, and ask the Chair of PPC to propose that arrangement.
There have been no changes to the arrangement of public business from what is published on the consolidated order paper, and there are currently 7 items with amendments listed, which is Draft Employment and Discrimination Jersey Amendment Law, P78 2024, with 2 amendments. And then Draft Employment and Discrimination Jersey Amendment Law. It's 5 amendments. There's also promotion of political awareness. Promotion of political education, evidence-based energy strategy with amendments, and draft single-use plastics, Jersey Amendment number 2 Law, P19 2025, draft Jersey Gas Company Amendment Law, P22 2025, organ donation memorial, P25 2025, and increasing assets and savings thresholds for affordable housing gateway, which is P26 2025. So given the number of propositions listed for the next meeting, I believe the Assembly will sit for 2 days, and so I propose the arrangement of business.
Members agree to accept the arrangements? Yes, Deputy Joseph?
Thank you, the Chair of PPC. She noted there was a lot of business. I have an amendment standing in my name relating to the energy policy. I've noted that there's comments from the government, but there's nothing in relation to my amendment. And I just wanted to signal to members that if there is no comment, if the government isn't going to make it, then I'd put it as a standalone proposition. But I would ask the government kindly to make comments on it. Otherwise, it's not going to be possible to have a good debate in time. Thank you, sir.
Well, do members agree to adopt the Deputy Ward?
Thank you, sir. Just for information to the Assembly, I will not be present in the next Assembly because I'm on CPA business, leading an election observation mission. Subsequent, just to let members know, so therefore I would not be here to answer questions as Minister. I know there is obviously a very capable fallback, but just so that people know. Thank you, sir.
Very well. On the arrangements of future business, does any member have any difficulty with the Deputy Tadier?
It's fine, so I'll leave it for now. I'd like to raise something separately with PPC, but I can wait. Thank you.
Very much indeed. Do members content to adopt the arrangement for future business? Yes. Very well. The Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 on Tuesday, the 22nd.